they get up at the fake news, you know, like CNN over here doesn't want to put them out because they don't like putting out good numbers. They only like putting out because I think they hate our country. Actually. Because you know it's asked by CNN and they always ask it with a slant because they're totally slanting because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching. Do we have to answer this question from you? Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that? Why do you go over and over? And that's why nobody watches you anymore. You know, you have no credibility. Like, do you allow men to play in women's sports? Do you allow men to box your women and box? You know, they put on an ounce, quarter of an ounce, eighth of an ounce for 18 years. Now they have a guy come up, the whole thing is. Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to have a friend of mine because we went through this together and got along very well for my entire period of time. So I knew him as a very young man. Now he's just a young man. And he's done a fantastic job. Mr. President, it's an honor to have you.
Thank you.
You're doing incredibly for your country. And we appreciate working with you because you want to stop crime and so do we. And it's very, very effective. And I want to just say hello to the people of El Salvador and say they have one hell of a president. Okay, and I mean that, and I know him well. I know him as a very young man, Marco, even younger than you. You know, he started pretty young.
We'll always be younger.
Young at heart. But I want to thank you for the great job you're doing. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Well, it's an honor to be here in the Oval Office with the President and leader of the free world. We're very happy, and we're very eager to help. We know that you have a crime problem, a terrorism problem that you need help with. And we're a small country, but if we can help, we'll do it. And we actually turned the murder capital of the world, that was the journalist call it,
right?
Murder capital of the world into the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. And you know, if sometimes they say that we imprison thousands. I like to say that we actually liberated millions. So, you know, like,
That's very good. Who gave him that line? Do you think I can use that?
Yes. And in fact, Mr. President, you have 350 million people to liberate.
Yeah.
But to liberate 350 million people, you have to imprison some. You know, that's the way it works, right? You cannot just, you know, free the criminals and think crime is going to go down magically. You have to imprison them so you can liberate 350 million Americans that are asking for the end of crime and the end of terrorism. And it can be done. I mean, you're doing it already. And I'm sure that people have seen the change in the streets. Yeah. A long way to go because you're just initiating your second term. But it's clear that, you know, with the numbers at the border, you know, even in Democrat-run cities, they get a help from the work you're doing. So I'm really happy to be here, honored, and eager to help.
On trade and other things, we're doing great. We're taking in billions and billions of dollars. We made 2 weeks ago, I gave them a little bit of a pause because, you know, you have to show a little flexibility. But we go back to what we have to do. The markets have been very strong once they got used to it. But we were losing $2 billion a day. There's no company big like this, but this is the biggest deal ever made. Now we're making $3 billion a day. We're a great country, but we had stupid people running this country, and I can say it. But what they've done to us at the border should never and can never be forgotten. It's a sin, what they did, and you are helping us out, and we appreciate it.
Actually, what you're doing with the border is remarkable. It has dropped, what, 95%? It's incredible.
Okay. As of this morning, 99%, 99.1% to be exact.
Why are those numbers not in the media?
Well, they get up at the fake news, you know, like CNN over here doesn't want to put them out because they don't like putting out good numbers. They only like putting out because I think they hate our country, actually. But it's a shame. You're right. Isn't that a great question? Why doesn't the media? Why don't they put out numbers?
Yeah, 99%. I mean, it's crazy, right?
We're doing
it's
great.
a crazy turnaround.
We're run by, and I don't say conservative, I don't say anything, we're run by people with great common sense.
Yeah, common sense.
Because it's all common sense.
Yes.
It's not liberal conservative, it's common sense.
Exactly.
And, like, do you allow men to play in women's sports? Do you allow men to box your women and box? Because I know you have a lot of boxing.
That's violence.
That's abuse of a
Violence
woman.
against women.
It's abuse of a
Totally.
woman. But we have people that fight to the death because they think men should be able to play in women's sports. And some of those sports, it wouldn't matter much, but it still matters. But some of them are very dangerous for women. You know, they have weightlifting records, right?
Yeah.
A woman gets up, lifts weights, she's incredible. A guy gets up and beats her by 100 pounds. What are you going to do? A record that hadn't been broken in 18 years. You know, they put on an ounce, quarter of an ounce, eighth of an ounce for 18 years. Now they have a guy come up, ping. The whole thing is crazy. But they continue to fight. And I don't like talking about it because I want to save it for just before the next election. I say to my people, don't even talk about it because they'll change. And, well, but I watched this morning, there was a congressman fighting to the death for men to play against women in sports. And you say to yourself, why? What are they doing, right? What are they doing? But your country's not too big in that.
No, of course not. We're big in protecting women.
You're good. That's right. It's a very important form of protection, too.
And as you can see, most of my cabinet are women, so.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Well, that's why you
And
run.
they're not DEI hires or
Yeah,
anything.
they
They're
can
just
be.
great at what they do, right?
That's right. This is very impressive.
Yeah,
This
no.
is a first. We've had women, but we've never had 3 of them right here. That's
4 and 3
And
men.
look who we have. You guys feel a little bit mistreated? That's good. I like it. Well, we've been advanced. I've been very advanced in that regard too. We have Pam, who's been so
Yes,
fantastic.
Christy.
And the most powerful woman they say
I
anywhere.
know,
in the world.
exactly.
She's rated.
They're all afraid of her.
Susie Wells, they say, oh, she's tough.
Yeah.
Most powerful woman in the world, according to magazines. What do I know?
Yes.
But I think she probably is.
Yeah.
You know, she probably is.
Congratulations.
And you know, Stephen has done such a great job. We have great people.
Very fantastic.
Do you have any questions, please? Go, let's not start with CNN because they're just so wrong. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. You repeatedly mentioned last night that Russia's attack on Ukraine was a mistake. What is the exact mistake? And had you given Putin a deadline to actually move toward a ceasefire?
The mistake was letting the war happen. If Biden were competent, and if Zelensky were competent, and I don't know that he is. We had a rough session with this guy over here. He just kept asking for more and more. That war should have never been allowed to happen. That war, I went 4 years and Putin wouldn't even bring it up. And as soon as the election was rigged and I wasn't here, that war started. There was no way that war should have been allowed to happen. And Biden should have stopped it. And you take a look at Putin. I'm not saying anybody's an angel, but I will tell you, I went 4 years and it wasn't even a question. He would never, and I told him, don't do it. You're not going to do it. And it was the apple of his eye, but there was no way that he would have done it. All you had to do is lower oil prices. If you lowered oil prices, Biden kept the prices so high because he made it impossible to get it. If you lowered oil prices, you would have never had the war. But you wouldn't have had it with me anyway. That war would have never happened. And I think it's a great abuse. So now what do? You get a country where 25% of its land is gone, and the best locations, where millions of people are killed. You know, you haven't reported accurately the death. And this was Biden's war, and I'm trying to stop it. And I think we're going to do a good job. I hope we're going to do. They lose 2,500 young people a week, think on average. Now they're Russians and they're Ukrainians, but it's 2,000, we don't care. It's like whatever it is.
Intolerable.
They're not from your country, they're not from mine, but I want to stop it. 2,500, it's a killing field. It's like the Civil War. You take a look, I look at the satellite pictures. This should not be happening in our time. Of course, our time can be pretty violent, as we know. But that's a war that should have never been allowed to start. And Biden could have stopped it, and Zelensky could have stopped it, and Putin should have never started it. Everybody's to blame. Millions of people dead because of 3 people. I would say 3 people. Let's say Putin number 1, but let's say Biden, who had no idea what the hell he was doing, number 2, and Zelensky. And all I can do is try and stop it. That's all I want to do. I want to stop the killing. And I think we're doing well in that regard. I think you'll have some very good proposals very soon. Go ahead. Let's hear the question from this very low-rated anchor at CNN.
Do you plan to ask President
Low-rated.
to help return the man who your administration says was mistakenly
Which one is that?
deported? The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam. Would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, 2 courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
So will you return him,
And
President?
you are doing a great job. Thank you,
Thank
Pam. Stephen Miller, wait a minute. Could you just also respond to that question? Because, it's asked by CNN, and they always ask it with a slant, because they're totally slanting, because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But would you answer that question also, please?
Yes, gladly. So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So, it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As 2 immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So he had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States and had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation. This issue was then, by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That issue was raised to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful, and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan
But
to
the
ask
Supreme
for
Court is
anything
asking
back?
to,
And
that
what was the
facilitate
ruling
that
in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0
In our favor?
in our favor against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States.
I asked
¿Usted lo
President
liberaría,
Bukele,
Presidente Bukele?
Can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to not suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's only
How
CNN.
can I smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like, could I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
but you could release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. We just turned the murder capital of the world to the safest country in the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? And that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal,
Yeah,
released into
I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it. But
Yeah.
they're sick. These are sick people. Marco, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I mean, Stephen outlined it. I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin. Except for Venezuela, that wasn't refusing to take people back, or places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President. No, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple. End of story.
And that's what the Supreme Court held, by the way, to Marco's point. The Supreme Court said exactly what Marco said, that no court has the authority to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. We won a case 9-0, and people like CNN are portraying it as a loss, as usual, because they want foreign terrorists in the country who kidnap women and children. But President Trump, his policy is foreign terrorists that are here illegally get expelled from the country, which, by the way, is a 90-10 issue.
Well, Mr. President, you said that if the Supreme Court said someone needed to be returned, that you would abide by that. You said that on Air Force One just a few days ago. And
How
they
long
said
do we
that
have to answer this question from you? Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that?
Well, it's illegal
Why
to
do you
say
go
Florida, it's
over
very
and over,
honest.
and that's why nobody watches you anymore? You know, you have no credibility. Please, go ahead.
President Trump, thank you so much. How many illegal criminals are you planning on exporting to El Salvador? And President Bukele, how many are you willing to take from the U.S.?
As many as possible. And I just asked the president, you know, it's this massive complex that he built, jail complex. I said, can you build some more of them, please? As many as we can get out of our country that were allowed in here by incompetent Joe Biden through open borders. Open borders. You probably hear open borders and you can't even understand it because nobody can understand. Nobody smart or with common sense can understand it. So we have millions of people that should not be in this country that are dangerous. Not just people, because we have people, but we have millions of people that are murderers, drug dealers. They've been allowed to come into our country by other countries that were very smart. When they heard that this very low IQ president, and by the way, I took my cognitive exam as part of my physical exam, and I got the highest mark, and one of the doctors said, "Sir, I've never seen anybody get that kind of, that was the highest mark." I hope you're happy with that, although they haven't been bugging me too much to take a cognitive, but I did do my physical and it was released. I hope you're all happy with it. I noticed there's no question, so probably you are. But the cognitive, they said to me, "Sir, would you like to take a cognitive test?" I said, "Did Biden take one?" "No." "Did anybody take one?" "No, not too many people took them." I said, what about Obama? Did he take one?" "No, he didn't take one either." I said, "Let me be the only one to take one." But I've actually taken them 3 times already. I like taking them because they're not too tough for me to take. But we had a great physical exam, so I know you're going to ask that.